Brandon Clarke apparently died last night, sometime in the evening around probably 5 o'clock. And these are just my general thoughts around this. So obviously, when I saw that today, that his name was trending, I on Twitter, I went and I clicked on it because I'm like, well, I wonder what the hell that's about. I actually felt like I saw his name trending within the last like couple of weeks. I feel like I saw that, and apparently in the last month, so April of 2026, he did get an arrest record because of the fact that he was pulled over for some traffic infractions. And on top of it, I think they found some paraphernalia, if I recall correctly, which means there's a pattern there. I was shocked when I saw that he had fucking croaked because, again, this dude's fucking like 29 years old. And yeah, he's just a role player, but I mean, the guy has fucking talent. He's a pretty fun guy to watch, and I feel like he's always been pretty damn underrated. Finding out that he died just doesn't feel right because obviously, again, like not only is he an NBA player, and these players or any athlete really in a major sport, they take even in cricket or rugby or whatever the fuck else you have anywhere in the world, even tennis, they take such relentlessly good focus and care of their bodies, of their diets, of what they put in their bodies, of how they treat it, including during or after injuries or surgeries or so many different things. So they're like some of the fucking healthiest people on this fucking earth you will ever come across, because that's a huge portion of being an athlete, a professional athlete, is your health. The whole thing is just like the best athletes in the world usually will pour tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars every year or two just into their diets, their health regimes, and workout routines and everything else alone, just to make sure that they're at the absolute peak and pinnacle of their possible health conditions. So like that's one thing. And then obviously he's 29. Nobody should be dying in their fucking 20s, teens, 30s, because you're in the prime of your fucking life, especially once you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s. It's literally your prime. Like, it's in your athletic prime obviously is your late 20s or really mid 20s, like basically 26 through about 34 to 36 for a professional athlete is their prime in every department, especially again in regards to the sport they play. It is obscene at that point that they should be able to die. Now, I was just initially, despite the shock, I was still thinking, I'm like, okay, well, let me guess, he got in like some sort of a horrible car accident, or God forbid, it was one of those things where he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time and he got fucking shot and killed because maybe he was breaking up a fight like Adrian Payne, or maybe again like he ended up in some way, whether directly or indirectly, associated with some sort of gang activity. And so like some shit like that went down, like, because that's actually pretty common, especially for NBA and NFL athletes. Like, any of those possibilities. And then also Memphis, all the complete negative shit bombing that happens from people across the board about the city of Memphis and the quality of life and its crime rates and its type of crimes and its murder rate and all this other shit is, believe it or not remotely hyperbolic. It's not remotely exaggerated. If you want to talk about pretty much a hellscape that is just spiraling out of control faster and faster every year to the depths of hell, it is absolutely fucking Memphis, Tennessee. It absolutely epitomizes that. That is not exaggerated to say. It's very, very well known and proven fact with data, with history, with track records, with statistics, the lives that people live there, and the amount of death that happens as a result. It's just in the amount of crime that happens, the types of crimes which are always almost high profile. It's a really shit place right now. Unfortunately, it's really sad because if you know the history of Memphis, Tennessee, it's akin to actually San Luis, Missouri, because they both were basically the Chicagos and the Detroits before Chicago and Detroit ever rose to prominence. Literally, they were originally planned to be the 1A and 1B to New York City of the country. And they originally were. But if you're fucking Memphis, the last, especially I'd say 5 to 10 years, it is just all of a sudden been like speed running becoming a hellscape. It is bizarre how that works. And it's prevalent to mention that because, again, there is a strong chance, especially these days, that it could just be a simple case of that, right? It could be a simple case of wrong place, wrong time, he gets shot, he dies. It's not remotely outside of the realms of high probability and possibility that could transpire. All of this to say, and including why it's relevant to this topic, is because here's the basic outline of what this proves, is that A, the Memphis Grizzlies genuinely don't give a flying fuck about any of their personnel. It doesn't matter if it's staff. It doesn't matter if it's the ball boys and girls or the janitors at the arena. It doesn't matter, obviously, if it's their own coaching staff or front office staff. It doesn't even fucking matter if it's your own damn players. Even your franchise cornerstone in Ja Morant. You just are completely hands off. You let them do and say whatever the fuck they want, and you just are completely hands off. You're like, you know what? Non-interventionism. We're just going to let you just literally spiral on your own. And clearly they did that with Brandon Clarke too. Years ago, when they still had, because they had obviously Dillon Brooks for years, when they still had Dillon Brooks, they could have, if they gave a fuck and they were good leaders, the ownership and the front office of the Memphis Grizzlies, they would have immediately intervened and gotten well ahead of the curve on trying to stem the tide of Dillon becoming such a incredibly and very intentionally dirty and unsportsmanlike player and a head case as he is. Like, they would have gotten ahead of that. They would have said, no, you're not going to play like that. You're not going to do that shit. That reflects badly on your teammates. That reflects badly on this franchise. That reflects badly on the NBA. Stop that shit. Like, we're going to do everything we can to make sure you do not do this, or you do not progress this at the very least any further than you already have it coming in. Because, of course, Dillon was known for that even in the University of Oregon here in Eugene. I say here, I'm not obviously Eugene, here in Oregon is what I mean. They would have gone ahead of that, right? And that should have been our first cue, our first red flag, our first sign of the non-interventionist mentality that the leadership in the Memphis Grizzlies organization franchise has had since he got drafted. They're completely hands off to the extent that they just let him fucking just keep getting more and more dirty, more and more unsportsmanlike, more and more dangerous, and more of a fucking head case. And when he became the veteran on that team and thus their leader, including the locker room, and then you draft somebody like Ja Morant, well, clearly that was a dire error to be hands off like that and let him go and develop in that arc. Because if they had gone into intervention and they had stopped it and gotten ahead of the curve, I said, we're not letting this go any further. Because this, again, right, it reflects badly on your teammates, it reflects badly on your coaching staff, it reflects badly on the team and the franchise as a whole, it reflects badly even on the league. Knock it the fuck off. Instead, he becomes the veteran voice in the locker room, pretty much. And so he is looked up to as the example by these new kids on the block that they've drafted. And so, naturally, that is going to accelerate the advancement of what we now know Ja Morant to be, which is himself a massive, egotistical fucking head case. Any irrational fucking idiot. This dude is like, since pretty much the start, he's been obsessed with doing something very illegal, by the way, which is brandishing a fucking firearm. He's been obsessed with doing that. He's been obsessed with, like, fucking, fucking, like, firing squad fucking celebrations. Sallies. He's been fucking obsessed with all of that shit. Basically killing. That's what he's been obsessed with. And in criminal threats, technically. He's been obsessed with the firearms for that specific use and reason. And he's been obsessed with insisting and even lying through his teeth that he came up in the hood and that he's some tough-ass thug. And like a gang member. And everyone and their dead grandmother knows that's horseshit. Ja is a guy who fucking came from an upper middle class family and a somewhat wealthy neighborhood, by the way, and had both of his parents at home the entire time. Okay? Like, we all know it's fucking fraudulent. He's a literal fucking poser. He's a literal fucking fraud. Why he's obsessed with this, we can't figure out, but it seems like somehow it was as simple as he was just a fan of NBA Youngblood. But again, if this franchise and the Memphis Grizzlies actually gave a fuck and actually, you know, did the right kind of thing, aka take the fucking lead, right? Be a good, competent actual leader, then they would have stepped in immediately and they would have done harsh reprimands and relentless work with him. They would have sent him to some sort of like behavioral rehab. They would have sent him to a bunch of like specific type of psychiatrists and counselors. They would have been doing everything possible in their power and paying for it, because this is their franchise player, to make sure he does not continue down this weird, illogical, and irrational path that is completely fictional and ruin his own reputation while also tanking the value and the success of his own franchise, which, oh yeah, that's exactly what we're witnessing right now. This is pretty much not just because of this non-interventionist, hands-off leadership style, aka there's no leadership here at all in the Memphis Grizzlies. It does not exist. Their leadership style is don't lead at all. Don't intervene at all. Don't support at all. Don't put people in rehab if they need it. Don't hold them accountable when they need to be held accountable. Don't even fucking bother reprimanding them. Don't punish it. No, don't do that. Because that would be taking the lead, right? That would be setting an example. We don't do that. Our leadership style is we disappear and we do nothing and we say nothing and we just let them do whatever the fuck. It's like some weird fucked up social experiment. It's kind of what the Grizzlies have been in their leadership style. And clearly they still are to this day, because this is how it gets to Brandon Clarke. Because Brandon Clarke has been there. I think, wasn't he drafted in, he was either drafted, I think, in 2017 or 2019. I think he was drafted 2019. So he's been there his entire career in Memphis. He's been a cornerstone in terms of like a locker room presence, and he's been one of the guys they look up to in terms of like, he's a great energy guy. The way he plays, like I said at the very beginning, right? I actually think he was a very undervalued role player when he was healthy, obviously. That's the thing, right? Is that he hasn't been healthy for basically 2 straight seasons. He hasn't really been able to play at all for like 2 straight seasons. It might even be like 2.5 at this point. Straight is what it's been, since he's really been able to properly play at all, because of his major hip injury and thus the surgeries relating to that. And I think he had a major ACL blowout, and so he had to heal that, and obviously all the other damage that comes with that, from bone contusions and probably microfractures in the femoral and the tibial heads and condyles, to the cartilage at the very least is probably going to be all scuffed and torn to pieces, or very damaged and bleeding. Like, you're going to have probably muscle tissue damage too, actually, in tears, because every structure in your joints is actively, and surrounding them is actively compensating, especially when something like that happens and you have a major fucking injury that blows out your joint or a ligament in it. Everything else now has to compensate twice as far and twice as hard and much and tense themselves to be able to compensate for that blowout. He had that as well, so that took him out. Both of those things took him out for basically, well, yeah, like 2 straight seasons. He's had to have so many surgeries. If the Grizzlies organization, so their ownership and their leadership through the front office at every level, including coaching staff, were interventionists as they should be, true good leaders, they step the fuck in and they're like, we're seeing you starting to get habits. We're seeing a pattern emerging that is not healthy and can get out of hand real quick, Brandon. And we understand why. And I will personally get to that in a moment, but like, we understand why. We fully understand it. We get it. You're struggling. Honestly, as you probably should be. We'd probably be more concerned if you weren't. Let's get you some fucking help. Let's send you to rehab. Let's get you a dedicated, good therapist that you match with, that you really like, that you click with. Let's help you get through this, and we'll do it together. which is the right kind of leadership. That's a good example. That's the only correct example to set. If you actually give a fuck about your fucking players and staff, that's what you would have done as soon as any of this started to happen and emerge. You would have stepped the fuck up, stepped in, and said, we're getting a handle on this before it can really even earnestly start and begin. Because we need you, and we want you to live a happy, long life, and we want you to have a long career. So let's nip this into the ass right now, right? That's what they should have done, and that's what they would have done if they were a competent and giving a fuck, if they had any fucks to give as a franchise and organization. So when it comes down to Brandon Clarke, and you know, again, the example where I say is like, if they intervened like that, as they should have, knowing that he's struggling and admitting that, what the struggling would have been, obviously, is, again, this is a guy who's deeply impassioned with playing basketball, right? That's his whole career, is he's playing basketball. Except he hasn't been able to play for 2 straight seasons, 2 straight years, right? He hasn't even really been able to participate in any scrimmages with his team, practices. So as a result, because he's kind of useless, sometimes he might be just sitting on the bench as a gargoyle, as I like to call them, basically just there to look pretty. And then the other half of the time, he's going to be at home or in a rehab facility rehabbing. So he's not even really with his team most of the time, potentially, or at least half of that amount of time, each time he had to go in for another surgery and everything else. So that's going to be a huge emotional struggle, because he wants to play, he's passionate about it, he just can't, and his body won't let him. And then on top of that, it is that lack of leadership from the franchise. And the fact that your franchise leader, which ends up being Ja Morant in the head case, and the fucking arrogant, ignorant, delusional fucking asshole he turned out to be, is your main cornerstone and leader, setting the example for everyone else on the team. That's gonna make it like probably 2-3 times worse if you're Brandon Clarke, because he was one of the other major leaders on that team in terms of the locker room presence and also the presence on the court, but he can't do that now. And so he's seeing them spiral because of Jod and how he's developed and the problems he's been causing the whole time. And if this is your support group, is pretty much your extended family, aka your teammates, and this is the kind of fucking teammates you have, you can bet your ass he's struggling like a motherfucker. And when they found him and declared him dead last night at 29 in his house, they said they found drug use paraphernalia nearby. And with it, they found over 200 grams of kratom. Kratom, there's a specific form of it that is typically used specifically to manage pain. It is a 100% natural, plant-based, basically homeopathic or naturopathic, therefore, medicine and treatment for pain. That is what kratom, one variety of kratom does. That's usually actually the variety of kratom that most people use, that or for, actually, believe it or not, energy and mood stabilization. So as a result, it isn't at all like the media and other people are likely going to try to pin it to be, or try to advertise and paint it to you as, oh, kratom is akin and very similar to, or is, a hard street drug. That is a lie. If you see that, know that's a fucking lie, and it's completely fraudulent. It is as fraudulent as Ja Morant is a fucking thug and a gangsta. Ironically, it's literally just as fraudulent as in complete horseshit. Therefore, it also should be really difficult to OD on kratom. My theory is that if it was the kratom that was involved in him overdosing and dying from it, it's not the kratom that did it. It's going to be that kratom ended up being laced. Because for some stupid reason now, all these stupid drug lords and drug dealers keep lacing all these other drugs with other drugs. They keep lacing that. And so that's where a large portion of the last year and a half of people dying from drug overdoses, especially hard drug overdoses, or supposedly overdoses of weed, which you cannot OD on weed, by the way, is because they keep lacing it with all these other hard, horrific drugs. But that's a great way to ensure that person you're selling the drug to fucking dies. And so if he didn't get this kratom from a direct, like, approved and, like, secure source like a normal store, then it was probably laced. That's probably what happened. But the point ultimately being is that that's the third reason, that a proof that he was struggling badly, and it would be the pain. He'd be struggling a lot with rehab and through pain. And so as a result, that undoubtedly, in my mind, is probably why he had been a user of Kratom since at least within the last handful of months, is because he's trying to do pain management, and maybe quietly behind the scenes, personally, he doesn't actually trust pharmaceuticals that much, aka mainstream medicine, that much. Maybe he'd prefer to avoid normal drugs, pharmaceutical drugs, and instead use a natural remedy for pain. Like, I like to use white willow bark. That's what I like to use for pain management. In the rarity that I have pain, usually it's after like a heavy amount of exercise or something, or I have like something get way out of whack in my spinal and pelvic rotation, then I'll start taking white willow bark, and it does genuinely help a lot. The point is that that's where that comes in. So he had 3 different points where you could tell he was struggling. And again, if literally there's the strongest chance that not only would Dillon Brooks not be so dirty in such a head case today, and Ja wouldn't necessarily have his obsession with brandishing his fucking handgun and fucking doing shooting and killing motions, firing squad motions for celebrations after hitting threes, and there's other obsessions with firearms that way, and then his fake gangsta mentality and belief that he's supposedly a gangsta when everyone knows he's not and he's a poser. That could have been curbed and stopped ahead of time, and he could actually be still a world-class fucking athlete and player who actually would have the Memphis Grizzlies in a completely separate position right now, and you probably still have D-Bane at that point. And Brandon Clarke might be alive to this day. He might still be alive, and he might end up living a really full life if it wasn't for the fact that this fucking organization and the Memphis Grizzlies refused to fucking step up and be leaders and step in and intervene and send people to rehab and basically it's therapy or whatever else they need to do, and give reprimands and punishments to those that are fucking up, like Ja Morant. This is why you need to be hands-on as an ownership and a leadership group and a sports franchise especially. This is why you need to be hands-on and thus fully interventionist, because you gotta nip it in the ass, right? Nip it in the bud before it develops into something or spirals into something really bad, or somebody spirals on your team, your franchise, to the point where they end up dying because they're coping so hard because they don't have the right support group around them, because their teammates are fucking assholes and idiots, and they don't have emotional maturity or rationality to be able to support them. And then you as a fucking leadership in your franchise won't fucking care enough to even ask if they're all right or see that they're struggling and actually do something about it, proving that they don't give a fuck. All of this could be completely reversed and different if they just actually gave a fuck. And the final point on that front is this: because of the fact that the Memphis Grizzlies, right, and these players on there are a NBA franchise, they are a brand, a huge extension of the NBA's global brand. That would mean that if the NBA itself, the National Basketball Association itself, actually gave a flying fuck, if they had any fucks to give, like they constantly insist that they do. They're always so proactive, supposedly, and so progressive, and athlete care and compassion, and making sure that, they lead in mental health and they lead in all this other stuff. They always performatively go out there in the media and they're constantly touting themselves as being leaders in all these different departments and being so progressive. If they actually, they're just giving a fuck and caring, if they actually did though, there would have been actions here way years ago, intervening in the Grizzlies franchise and basically giving them an ultimatum, the ownership and the leadership, and saying, look, if you don't start intervening and you don't start actually leading this team and leading your players and actually intervening when they need to be intervened on, and sending them to rehab when they need to be sent to rehab, and sending them to psychiatrists, psychologists, and therapists when they need that, or working with them to make sure that they have a positive mindset and influence and focus point, whatever it might be, right? If you don't do that, we are going to force you to sell the team to somebody who will, and we are going to completely get rid of all your staff, and we're going to hire new ones that will intervene and will step up and be the leader that they should be there inevitably without having to be asked to fucking lead. If the NBA cared, that's what they would have done. They would have done that years ago. The fact that they obviously themselves have the rest record from April, and they have all this other stuff that shows that Brandon Clarke started to spiral. They have the whole thing before anyone in the public ever heard about it, with Ja Morant's problems and Dillon Brooks' problems and all the other weird shit that's been going on in this franchise. They get it well before anybody in the public ever does. They're the first ones to get it from the franchise directly. So if they gave a fuck, they would have intervened so long ago, so many years ago, and Brandon Clarke might still be alive to this day. But instead, they're just themselves performative. Everything they say and do and claim that they do is fraud. The NBA has never had any fucks to give about any of their players, about any of their staff, about any of the fans, about anything outside of, well, basically appeasing advertisers and making as much money as they possibly can. And this couldn't be more provable about that, because how does this reflect on the NBA as a whole? Fucking horrifically. Because it literally does exactly what I just said it does. That's exactly what it proves. Brandon Clarke died last night so that hopefully you and everyone else out there can finally acknowledge the NBA has never given a fuck. And also, the Memphis Grizzlies literally do not care at all either. And they refuse to do anything about their players or making sure that they're okay. That's the sad reality.